This is why, Sammy, I never get confident or overconfident whenever I'm playing fantasy football because I was sitting there. So my buddy Sheridan, I'm up by 6-0 going into the Sunday night game. And I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. But he has Jordan Love and Tucker Kraft. And as long as you have been paying attention to football over the last, I don't know, 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever, those guys combined for like 70 points. And now I'm losing and I'm not going to win. But there's still some things going on tonight. What do you need to win your fantasy football league? Do you need some Isaiah Pacheco? Do you need some Xavier Worthy? If you need Rashee Rice, you might be in pretty good shape. If you need a commander, I think that even guys like Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin can help you out. We still have hope. So, Sammy, let's start the show.
Welcome to our Fantasy Island.
Welcome to our Fantasy Island. Typically in this spot, we would have Kendall Valenzuela joining us here to answer questions with you. However, tonight is going to be game 3 of the World Series between the LA Dodgers and the Toronto Blue Jays. Kendall is taking her dad. I don't know if I'm sharing too much. I don't know. I didn't listen to her show today, so I don't know if she's over. Like if she's like, "Hey guys," like if I'm ruining this for her, but at the same time, she's not going to be here. She'll be back next week to go out there, answer some fantasy questions. We can talk about some of the early players on the waiver wire. We can talk about some of the other happenings here in fantasy football. So unless I see a question or two, if you have a very specific question, go ahead and leave it here in the chat. We'll try to get to it. Try to get to as many of these questions as much as possible, but do want to talk about some of the biggest studs in fantasy football so far this season. And I'll sit here and I'll monitor the questions just to make sure there isn't anything out there that we are missing. There we go. Hey, listen to this. Jonathan Taylor has been absolutely fantastic this season. He has scored close to 40 fantasy points against the Tennessee Titans on a Sunday. I know it's tough for our producers who are ardent Titans fans, but Jonathan Taylor, 150 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, a one of those shovel passes for receiving touchdowns, ending up with 3 on the day. You know, it's one of those things. Jonathan Taylor is like last season's Saquon Barkley, where there wasn't a lot of buzz. There was one kid, like one of the TikTok influencers was talking up Jonathan Taylor earlier in the offseason. And I remember hitting them like, you know what, Jonathan Taylor does make a lot of sense, a lot of opportunity. The only question was, and I think for a lot of people, they weren't sure if he was going to be able to go out there considering the uncertainty at the quarterback spot. Was this going to be something that, you know, was it going to work out? Was the offense even going to be able to move the ball? But of course, Daniel Jones is out there playing at an MVP level, but it does show you how good a running game can be for your fantasy football team. When your team can run the ball, that makes it so much easier for your quarterback to go out there and have some success. Now, I do want to go out there and talk about, before we go any further, let's talk about some of the inactives for today's game. Obviously, for the Commanders, Jaden Daniels is going to be out. Matt Gay, the kicker, is going to be out. Nothing too unexpected. And on the other side, Trey Smith is going to be out for the Kansas City Chiefs. One of the reasons I bring that up is because Isaiah Pacheco and Brashard Smith are 2 players that a lot of people have been relying on this week because of Mageddon. So going out there, trying to figure that out, trying to get that running situation sorted with the Kansas City Chiefs. It's one of the most frustrating things in fantasy football because you have a team that is so prolific on offense, and yet they're not going out there and getting the production that you would want from them. It's been a very tough go to have some consistency, but Kareem Hunt is actually starting to become a guy that we're moving away from. Brashard Smith is going to end up being the guy that I think ultimately, now if he's available in your leagues right now, I would go out there and try to make a move for him. Try to get him into your lineup as much as possible, because I do think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to see a bigger influence from him. I also, it could be as soon as tonight, because I think this is a pretty good matchup for the Kansas City running game, even though Troy Smith is not out there. There's my own voice. turn that off. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and fly them in here. Just, fire away. If you have a start, sit question, anything like that. Probably not at this point. At this point, you're typically pot committed and all that stuff. Patrick Mahomes, though, I do have him, like the rebirth of Patrick Mahomes is something that needs to be studied. He's had at least 6 games with over 22 fantasy points this season. That's most amongst quarterbacks. He's had 18 offensive touchdowns. That is the most in the NFL. He's also got a really good matchup this week against the Washington Commanders. They've allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. Could be a big night for Patrick Mahomes. Washington has 3 takeaways on the year. This is tied for the second fewest in the NFL. Only the New York Jets have less in fantasy football. Rashee Rice, he was targeted on more than 60% of his routes in week 7. He averaged a point and a half per route run in week 7, I should say. A very efficient use of his time. Washington has allowed the 10th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season. Travis Kelce, even though it is no longer National Tight Ends Day, although I don't know if it's one of those things where it extends through the weekend. Like, for instance, my kids always get the day after Halloween off during their school district. This year, obviously, Halloween is on a Friday, but they're going to get the following Monday off. I don't know if the same thing happens with Travis Kelce, if he is just going to go ahead and be rolled over into National Tight Ends Day, but he's had at least 13 fantasy points, 2 out of his last 3 games, 50 receiving yards in each of those 3 games. The Commanders, again, have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to the slot this season. The slot. They have not covered slot receivers that well. Travis Kelce, regardless of his position designation, does a great job of working out of the slot. Deebo Samuel is one of the most interesting ones to me, because the thing with Deebo Samuel, and I need to go back and make sure that's, oh, geez, good. There we go. Okay. Deebo Samuel, he was so prolific in the early part of his NFL career because he was running the football. And then Deebo Samuel decided, like, hey, I don't want you guys running me as much as we did before, because I want to be paid. I want to be paid like a wide receiver. I don't want to be paid like a running back. And it was one of the points of emphasis for him, is that he wanted to make sure that he was making the proper money. Now with Washington, they are using him a little bit more as a running back, as somebody who can carry the ball. He leads Washington in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. He's had at least 17 fantasy points in 4 of the 6 games that he's played this season. I think with the creativity of Cliff Kingsbury, he's got to go out there and do that a little bit more, get more creative with the football. And what are we going to do, though, with Ja'Cory Krosky-Barrett? Now, I know at this point you're either starting him or you are not, and that's been predetermined in your fantasy roster. There's not much you can do about it anymore, but he has played close to 60% of the snaps since becoming the starter in week 5, so that is great news. And the problem, though, is that he's not been efficient with his touches. He's averaging just over 3 yards per carry. He's got to improve that. Kansas City has not allowed a top 25 running back in each of the last 3 weeks. That running defense is starting to become a thing for the Kansas City Chiefs. So you got to keep an eye out on that. So it's going to be very difficult. I don't know. I know a lot of people thought that perhaps Bill Krosky-Barrett was going to be a league winner this year. And speaking of league winners, Crown Champs just dropped the hottest thing that has ever happened to fantasy football. We're talking about real customizable championship crowns. You can go to crownchampscompany.com. That's crownchampscompany.com. And for just $3 per month per person, your league can go out there and get a quality crown for your league. Don't worry about a cheap plastic trophy. Don't worry about a lame old GG in the group chat. We're talking about handcrafted championship crowns, scepters, robes, and all sorts of things that show everybody that you are not just a fantasy champion, you are fantasy royalty. So don't just win your fantasy league. We need you to go out there and rule it. Go to crownchampscompany.com, use the promo code SICK15 and get 15% off your order. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our friends at Huel for making the product that keeps me going during these days. I just did NFL Fantasy Live. I'm here doing Fantasy Isle. Normally, I would be on CHGO after this, but I'm not going to do that. I've got a training session with my U12 girls, and we're going to go out there and we're going to go get ready. The playoffs are looming. And one of these shakes, either you go out there and you mix it yourself, or if you're lazy like me, you just have a bunch of these in the refrigerator. These are 400-calorie meal replacement shakes. They have 35 grams of protein, and it's better than going to the donut shop. There's a donut shop that's right down the street. It's absolutely fantastic. But you know what? Instead, I go out and have one of these shakes. My life, I feel so much better. I feel like such a better, I don't hate myself after I do it. Go to Huel.com/sickbears, Huel.com/sickbears, or go to Huel.com, use the promo code sickbears, get 15% off your first order, set up a subscription. They deliver it right to your house. All right. I don't know if we have any other questions or any other comments from people in here, or if you're just watching, seeing what's going on in fantasy football. I do want to say a couple of things about some of the players. We need to start looking into the waiver wire a little bit. I want to go over a little bit of the news that's been happening over the last couple of days. Now, obviously, I think a lot of us saw what happened to Cam Skattebo over the weekend. I actually went out and offered my ankle in tribute to Cam Skattebo, but unfortunately, it does not work that way. One of the most horrific injuries. It was so jarring because we were sitting there at the bar watching the Bears game, and my friend's like, oh, he comes up. He's like, hey, Cam Skattebo. And I have Cam Skattebo on a number of teams. And I whipped my head around just in time to see the injury, just to see a replay of the injury. Number one, Fox, stop showing the replays. Hey, Cam Skattebo, that's all I needed to know. Don't need to see it. We're good. Let somebody find it on YouTube or whatever it is. We don't need to be seeing this on a broadcast thing. I just don't want to, I just don't want to see it. But in any event, Cam Skattebo, and you know, the thing about him, and this is one of the great things about Cam Skattebo, the ovation that he received from the Philadelphia Eagles fans, the same Eagles fans that cheered when Michael Irvin laid motionless on the ground were standing on their feet, saluting Cam Skattebo. Of course, now as we move on in fantasy football, Tyrone Tracy is going to be the next man up. He scored just over 7 fantasy points in his limited time, 10 rushes, 39 rushing yards, 2 receptions, 14 yards. He averaged less than 6 fantasy points per game as a starter, and fewer than 55 scrimmage yards in every game this season. I'm not saying that it's a good option, but it's an option. Now, the Cleveland Browns are going to be on a bye this week, but Quinshon Judkins got dinged up a little bit in that game. We hope that he's going to be back and ready to go when the Browns return from their bye week. However, Jerome Ford is somebody you need to keep an eye out on. I would say you go pick him up right now. If you have room on your roster for Jerome Ford, I would go out there and make that move a little bit early. If you want to go out there and make a move and just want to try to solidify yourself or anything like that. At the same time, I also want to let people know too, Joe Flacco said that he was less than 100%, which is not surprising because he's 90. He's an old man playing football. Yeah, you're not going to be at 100%. I don't even think he's day-to-day. I don't even think you need to monitor. And they're playing the Bears. So who gives a bleep? Because the Bears couldn't stop. Actually, I want to talk about that for just a second. I know a lot of people are like, hey, Snoop Huntley outperformed. No. Our defense did not get tore up by Snoop Huntley. By the way, a defense that's missing all of their cornerbacks, a lot of injuries on the defensive line. And I'm not saying that Baltimore wasn't dealing with their fair share of injuries. That's not what I'm saying. But the Bears had shut them down. And if the Bears had been able to score maybe 1 touchdown on one of the first 2 drives, for sure, 2, that game's put away. And we're going all the way to the bank laughing because it's a completely different ball game. Again, the Bears need to execute better. It's not an excuse. We're not going to talk about the refs or anything like that. The Bears need to execute better. If the Bears go out there and take care of their business, the defense doesn't look that bad. Snoop Huntley didn't throw for 500 yards against our depleted defense. So stop talking that way. The offense needs to go out there and execute. Ben Johnson talked about that today. As a matter of fact, Ben Johnson, we'll talk about this more with Nick Rohde tomorrow. Ben Johnson went out there and kind of addressed this with the absolutely addressed this with the media today, saying, look, this is a situation where the offense needs to play a lot better. He went back and watched the tape of Caleb Williams and said it wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be. But again, the Bears are having a really hard time overcoming penalties. And that, listen, every team is penalized. The officiating is atrocious for every team, except for Kansas City and maybe Washington. But that's not an excuse, because you have to be better about that, or you can just cut down the mental mistakes. And Ben Johnson said that today. And he said, look, you got to go out there, and I wish there was some accountability in the locker room with somebody holding this team to a higher standard. And I saw somebody like, oh, that's good. That's good, because Ben Johnson is going to be here for the long haul. And Ben Johnson is going to start molding this team with players in his own image who will hold people accountable. So if there is veteran leadership that is not holding players accountable, I don't expect them to be veterans on this team for much longer. And that's exactly what we should want. We should want accountability. That's the one reason why we brought in Ben Johnson. It's one of the reasons why I was personally advocating for Mike Vrabel. I love Ben Johnson. I think he's great for this team. But I also love Mike Vrabel too. But that's the thing. You're seeing it in New England. We need to see that more in Chicago, holding people accountable for making mistakes, silly mistakes. Mistakes can be corrected. By the way, this all was just a jumping off point about me talking about Joe Flacco being day-to-day. And it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter who the quarterback is what I'm saying. A couple other waiver wire guys. Let me give you a couple other waiver wire guys before we get out of here. Early waiver wire targets for week 9. I'm going to say Josh Downs, who's going to be going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. He's had close to 14 fantasy points per game over the last 3. He was averaging less than 7 fantasy points per game in his first 4, but has really come on. He's had a receiving touchdown in back-to-back games. His first time he's done that since his rookie season in 2023. 5 red zone targets in the last 2 games. He had only 1 in the first 5. Christian Watson. Oh, man. I don't even know if you really want to go out there and trust anything that's going on with the Packers wide receivers, because it could be anybody who scores at any time, including Tucker Kraft. But Christian Watson is back, scored 12.5 fantasy points. Sam Darnold, for those, if you want to go out there, if you need a quarterback, if you're sitting there with Jaden Daniels and don't know when he is going to return. Now, Lamar Jackson allegedly practiced today, is expected to play on Thursday, whatever that means. But if you need a quarterback, go see if somebody during the By-Mageddon released Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold has at least 20 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games. He has 3 games with over 290 passing yards this season and leads the NFL with 9.1 yards per pass this year. And he's got Washington on Sunday. Washington has allowed the most yards passing per game. You know this. I said this a moment ago. One other guy we need to talk about, though, before we go. Shout out to all my friends who root for the Denver Broncos. I believe I will be picking you guys again this week. I don't know who you play. It doesn't matter. Picking the Broncos. But Troy Franklin has finally started to emerge. Last season, people are trying to make that narrative stick. Hey, Troy Franklin, he played with Bo Nix, but Troy Franklin, just about 27 fantasy points against the Dallas Cowboys, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 89 yards, a pair of touchdowns. The only guys who have a bigger red zone share than Troy Franklin this season, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Adams, and Jamar Chase. And if you're looking for a place to watch Broncos games, if you're out there in Chicago, or even if you're a Bears fan, you want to watch the Bears game this weekend, might I suggest Twisted Shamrock, the place to be for Chicago sports. Whether you're a fan of the Bears, Bulls, Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Sky, or Fire, Twisted Shamrock is the place to be on game day. Nobody does it like them. Monster giant screen TVs in their private party room, over the main bar, and of course outside. I will be at the Twisted Shamrock Saturday night, the night before the Cleveland Browns game in Chicago. I'm flying into Midway. I'm landing. I'm going directly to the Twisted Shamrock. We will tilt back an old-fashioned back there and have a good time and talk about the Bears And hopefully we're talking about the playoffs at that time. So thanks everybody for being here this weekend. I know you were mightily disappointed that Kendall Valenzuela was not joining us. Hey, I am too. But in any event, good luck to you in your fantasy this week. We'll see you next time. And until that time, Sammy, or bear down, and Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.